Shalom, shalom to all of you, my heavenly Father's children. Scattered to the four corners of the earth, put on slave ships, migrations, and all of these different things. It's, first of all, I would like to say that, I was supposed to do the message on Shabbat, but I was urged to wait until Pasach. And we're going to continue the series. This is the ox and the bull, the wheat and the tares, and the beating of the olive tree. So we're going to start here. We're going to go to. I want you to flip with me to the page. I need you to go to Jeremiah or Jeremiah 31, and we're going to start at 32. Okay. So this is Jeremiah 31, 32. And it says, "This covenant which I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand out of Egypt will not be replaced. Which covenant they broke, although I was a father to them." A husband, when it says father there, is symbolizing a marriage. It's symbolizing a bond. A bond. This bond isn't physical, it's spiritual, right? So now let's look at this. He says, although I was a father to them, says Yahweh, for this covenant is the same covenant that I will renew with the house of Yasharal after those days. Okay. So it's very important for us to understand that the people in which he's talking about here is the northern kingdom of Israel, which are separate at this point from the children of Yahweh, which would be the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom being the latter, right? Now, let's look at this. He says, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, minds. I will be their father and they will be my people. Why is he saying this? He's saying this because of what happened beforehand. He's saying this because of what happened, or he's saying this because of what's going to happen and what has already transpired in the splitting of the kingdom between these two houses. Yahweh, which is what they call Judah, and then you have Israel, which is, the tribe, the 9.5 tribes that were exiled during the Assyrian captivity and exile. Okay. But I want us to flip back because he's talking about the covenant. Yahweh, the Most High, is speaking on the covenant. So we have to understand what this covenant is. And this covenant was made with us when we came out of the land of Matazah Rayam, or in the Israeli, Mitzrayim, or in English, Egypt, right? The main part of the covenant that we want to focus on is the first 4 commandments, specifically, right? Because if we don't keep the first 4 commandments correctly, then we cannot keep the latter part of the law, which is the six following laws, correctly. So let's get into it. Let's see why this covenant is so important. So this is the beginning of Exodus chapter 20. And Yahweh spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh, your heavenly Father, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no hinder gods. So now I'm pretty sure I covered the word 309 in the Hebrew, which is akar, which in most translations, that word would be translated as other. Okay. This word other is a misnomer. It doesn't belong there. The word that belongs there is hinder. So when you read Exodus chapter 20 and you see that word other, you have to think hinder. Hinder and other have two completely different definitions. They are not the same. Okay? Other is implying that he is one of them or one of these gods, right? And then, that's kind of putting him in the same category and, making him common with what has, been widespread all over the land from, from Egypt to Canaan to Philistia, all of the peoples that were encompassing the land. They all worshiped the same deity under different names and titles. But the most popular title was the word Al in the ancient Hebrew and El in the Israeli. Okay? So let's look at this. He says, You shall have, this is chapter 20, Exodus, verse 3. You shall have no hinder gods. Alahayam. Okay? Now I want us to really understand the magnitude of what he's saying, because this is highly, highly important. And if we don't understand this, then we are missing very important keys to the kingdom. Okay? For all who aspire to go into the kingdom, he who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says. So let's look at word 309. Okay? Let's go back to that because we want to get a firm foundation of what this word hinder means, what this word achar in the ancient Hebrew means. All right? So let's look at word 309. And this is a book from 18, what is this? Let me give you the year so you know that this is an older book. This book is from 1890. So this book is a very old book, okay? This is not to be compared with the lexicons that are being used today, which are revised, okay? The lexicons in which Bible Hub and those other platforms are using are modern Strong's exhaustive concordances, which they have, like I said, they have been rewritten and revised. So let's see what the older Hebrew lexicon says, the Hebrew dictionary. Okay, this is word 309. I want you to mark this down. I want you to write this down because this is important. It says achar, a primitive root. So this means this is the base of the language. This is the foundation of the language. When it says primitive root, this is the foundation of the language. It says to loiter, i.e., be behind. By implication, to procrastinate, continue, defer, delay, hinder, be late, slack, stay there, tarry longer. Okay? So we don't want to hinder the connection between us and the Father. This is something that we do not want. We want to have a direct connection to the Father through his Son, Yahweh Shah Hamashiach. Okay? And the reason why this message is very vital to what's happening right now, we are literally witnessing the beginning of the greater Exodus, not second Exodus. Okay? I hear that term a lot, and when you do a little bit of research, you find out that the Zionists coined the term second Exodus. But see, that doesn't fully match what the scriptures describe in the regathering of the people who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth. It doesn't do it justice. Okay. So when we think of it in terms of the greater Exodus, or the greater exit, this Exodus is greater than the first one. We will no longer remember the first Exodus, which we're reading about in Exodus, right? We're reading about what happened when we came out of Matazarayam, or Egypt in English. We're reading about what was given to us and the bond that was made between us and the Most High, whose name is Yahweh. Okay. Then he goes on to say, you shall not make for yourself. Before I say that, before I go into the Most High's words, I want to point out that 4 and 5 are one law. That chapter 20, verse 4 and verse 5 are one law. Okay? Then he says, you shall not make for yourself any carved image, an idol, which is a god, in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. So, okay, I hear a lot of people saying, well, we shouldn't be making images. Making the images is not the point. The point is that, we aren't to bow down and worship these images. Okay? We can use the images in order to depict something as close as we can with accuracy. Okay, so when we post pictures, showing the Messiah as melanated, we're not breaking the commandment because we're not bowing down to it. We're giving it as a visual marker for you to see, because we have to unbrainwash ourselves from the image that we have seen. The image that we have been given was a pale man, or in some cases, people say pink man, with blonde hair and blue eyes. So if this is the case, then we have to retrain our imagery to see the Messiah as he truly is, not as the image that oppressors gave us, right? So now, he says, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, Yahweh, your heavenly Father, am a jealous heavenly Father, punishing the law breaking of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing mercy. In some cases it says mercy, but here it says love, showing love to thousands who love me by keeping my laws. And this, when he says showing love to thousands, this is literally referring to the remnant, but also referring to the remnant within the remnant, which is the 144,000, which is not all in one era. Okay, it's not all in one era of time. That's a misconception of what's going on here. The priesthood was automatically promised from the beginning with Adam. Okay, the priesthood was passed to Abal, or they say Abel. Okay, the priesthood was passed to him. Then the priesthood, because he was sacrificed by his brother Cain, the priesthood was passed to Seth. and then Enoch, and then we get into all of that, Noah, and so on and so forth. So the priesthood has always been here. And there are people who are chosen out of every age. Okay, we have to look at the pattern. When Moses, okay, excuse me, when Noah or Noach in ancient Hebrew, when he was charged with building the ark, he was told that him, his wife, and his 3 sons and their wives would be saved. So this is a handful of people that the Most High used to repopulate, to redo, to wipe out the wickedness, and to bring in a person who would start the world all over again with righteousness. But somehow that righteousness got compromised. As we know from the Tower of Babel, some say Babel, the Tower of Babel, which is it's called the Gate of the Gods. Okay? It's the gate of God and the gate of the gods. So when people say, oh, the word El, it only came from, Canaanite mythology, that's not true, because it actually started from Babylon and it worked its way down through the generations, through multiple different peoples, and it ended up with the Canaanites and ultimately ended up with our people, the Israelites. Okay? So I want to point this out. So let's go to right here. Okay, I hear you. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go back to Jeremiah, or Maya, and we're going to go there. We're going to go back to 31, and we're going to look at chapter 31, Jeremiah, verse or passage 34. Okay? And they will no longer teach every man his neighbor or kinsman. The correct word that should be there is kinsman. Even if you look it up on Bible Hub and Anchor Bible and all of these different places where they have lexicons, you can look at the word neighbor and you'll see the definition kinsman. Okay? So this is important. Why? We're going to see. Every man his neighbor and every man his brother, instructing them, know Yahweh, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says Yahweh. For I will forgive their iniquity and remember their sin no more. Okay. So he says that he will remember the iniquity of our people no longer, right? No longer are we subjected to the wrath of the Father, right? But this is only upon us coming into the bond of the covenant. Okay? And this bond of the covenant is very important. Let's look at something else here. This is Yeshaya or Isaiah, which some people say the Messiah's name is Yeshaya, but that's impossible because Isaiah's name is actually Yeshaya in ancient Hebrew. Okay? So now let's look at this. We're going to start at the beginning of chapter 27, and we're going to work our way down to chapter 9. Okay? And I want you to see this with brand new eyes. I want you to close your physical eyes, and I want you to put your spiritual eyes in the sockets. Okay? And I want you to open your spiritual ears. I want you to turn off your physical ears and turn on your spiritual ears. Okay? So follow me now. Watch this. He says, in that day, in in that day, what day? The appointed time, which is the time of the end, which we're living in. In that day, Yahweh, with his unrelenting and great and strong power, will punish the prophets of the assemblies of the serpent. Stop. Okay, so in Samuel, Shaul or Shawal in ancient Hebrew was king. Okay, and he disobeyed direct orders given to him from the Most High through the prophet Samuel. Okay, and Samuel told him that rebellion is as witchcraft. Okay, and I want you to follow me where I'm going with this. Okay, so the Hebrew word that is there for serpent is nakash. Nakash doesn't mean a serpent. Okay, that's not what it means. See, they saw in the definition a hiss, but they attributed that to a literal snake, a literal serpent, but it's not a serpent. Okay, it's sorcerer or sorceress. In this case, the assembly of the serpent is a sorceress. Okay, because Hashatan, regardless of what you've been taught, regardless of what you've been told, is not a male being. Is She's not a male being. This is where we see the symbolism of Baphomet with the male and female attributes and all of these different things. We see it in the transgender culture, in homosexuality, and all of these different things. This is why those things are. Uh, um, this is why those things are here, because it's a representation of the usurping of authority. The authority was originally given to the man, not the woman. The woman is to be led by her husband. Okay? Follow where I'm going with this. Remember, we read that the Most High Yahweh is the husband. Follow me now. Okay? So this is what he says. He says, including those who have departed from the faith. So, people, they say faith, 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 faith. But what we have to understand, faith is not just faith, is the faith. Is the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What they believed and what they practiced and what they looked forward to, okay? Which they looked forward to the ultimate redemption of the descendants of their people, which we're witnessing right now in real time. Then he goes on to say, I will give these perverted ministers of the serpent, that beast of the depth, the sentence of death. In that day, sing to her a vineyard of red wine. I, Yahweh, keep it. I water it every moment, so none hurt it. I keep it night and day. Fury is not in me. Stop. So do you think the Most High wants to punish his people? Do you think he takes joy in our exile? Do you think that he takes joy in our captivity? Do you think he takes joy in the things that has transpired to us during our captivity and exile? No, because his thoughts towards us are righteous and pure. So if his thoughts towards us are righteous and pure, then that doesn't fit. Okay? So then he goes on to say, Verse 4, chapter 7, Yeshaya, Isaiah, fury is not in me. Who would set briars and thorns against me in battle? I would go through them, I would burn them together. Stop. Let's look at something that parallels this, which we understand is a precept. Okay? So let's precept that, and let's look at what he says here. Let's look at what Hamashiach says here, because what Hamashiach says here is paramount. It's important. He says, this is Mattathiah or Matthew 13, and we're going to look at verse 40, right? He says, just as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. So we see the connection from what the heathens and Europeans call the New Testament to the Old Testament, and the Old Testament to the New Testament, which all of that's made up. It's all one book from beginning to end, from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelations. Is all one book. And the name of this book originally, before they labeled it, was called the Book of Yahweh. Okay? It's not called the Bible. No, that's European. Because you got to understand, the English word Bible comes from the Greek word biblio. Okay? Which is not, this book is called Ha Safar Yahweh. The whole entire book. Or Sapar Yahweh. Because the F sound is Greek impositions, right? They imposed it on our language. Okay? So we see that he mentions the fire. We see that he mentions the tares will be gathered and thrown into the fire. And he said, so will it be at the end of the age, which we're coming up on now. We are literally currently in the year 5,991. Closing, we're coming to the closing of the 6,000 years that Yahweh allotted for man's rebellion. And the 6,000th year, okay, I want you to follow me. The 6,000th year is the very transition into the next period, which that next period would be the 1,000-year millennial reign. Okay? So now, let's go back to Yeshaya. Then he says what? He says, fury is not in me. Would I set briars and thorns against who would set briars and thorns against me in battle? Would I would go through them and burn them together, or let them take hold of my strength, so that they may make peace with me, and I will make peace, and they will make peace with me. Excuse me. Then he goes on to say, this is the prophet speaking, he will cause those who come out of Ya'aquab to take root. Yashariah will blossom and bud, and fill the face of the world with fruit. He has smitten him, Yashariah. Talking about Yahweh smiting Yashariah. Okay, then we're seeing it now. We're seeing what he was saying in Yasha or Jeremiah, right? We're seeing what he's saying in real time, right? We're seeing the connection made, which is a precept, by the way. Okay. Then he goes on, and he mentions, he says, he has smitten him, Yashariah, or Israel. He, as he smote those who smote him, have the Israelites been slain as their slayers were slain? Think about that. Think about what happened to us when we were getting on those ships. Think about what happened to us when we were on those ships. Now, think about what happened to us after we got off of those ships. And the oppression that started before we got on the ships is still here today. And the oppression is coming from the descendants of Japheth, not Esau. They're not Esau. And we can prove that multiple ways. Okay? They're not Esau. They are indeed the descendants of Japheth, who has mixed with the fallen seed, the fallen watchers. Okay? So, he goes on to say, by driving them out of Canaan, or taking the teaching of Canaan out of them. Taking the teachings of the Canaanite out of the Israelite. It's very important that we see this, because when we see it the way it's meant to be seen, then everything makes sense. But see, we have to realize that Yahweh has called the ministers in these last days. Many say in the awakening, we don't trust in man. But if I'm not mistaken, that would be breaking the pattern that has been set before us. Wasn't Masha a man? Wasn't the judges of Yashariah before the monarchy? Weren't they men, including, a couple of females? The Messiah walked this earth as a man. So to say that you don't trust in man, that's out of order. The kingdom has a hierarchy. And once you understand that, you'll understand the authority of the ministers that have been given the charge to come unto you, that have been given the charge to keep you in the way and the path of righteousness. Okay? So now, he says, by driving Canaan out of them, by exile, you contended with them in measure. Talking about Yahweh, he's the you that contended with them, which is us, in measure, with his fierce wind, he drives her out on a day when the east wind blows. That east wind is blowing now. And we have to remove certain teachings and certain doctrines out of the way. Because when we remove these stumbling blocks, we can walk accordingly. We can walk in unison, being one with the Father and the Son. This is what one means. When it says Yahweh is one, it says unity. That means Yahweh is the Father of order. Okay? Yahweh is not the author or the father of chaos. This is exactly why his name couldn't be Yahuwah or Yehovah. When you look up the Hebrew definitions of Hua and Hoa, which are Israeli interpolations and additions, right? But you get to see something when you look up the word Hawa. You get to see something completely different from Hua and Hoa when you look at Hawa. Ha-wa. That's Hawah, which this is the reason why Joshua, his name literally in the ancient Hebrew is Yahweh Shah, which means Yahweh is salvation. And his name was changed to that by Masha, or who they call Moses, but it was changed to that for a reason, to get you to look for the one who will come and deliver us, whose name is Yahweh Shah. But in this case, he's not the son of Banan, he's the son of Yahweh. Okay? Verse 9, chapter 7, Yeshaya, Isaiah, verse 9. He says, by this condition only will I, excuse me, by this condition only will the iniquity of Ya'aquab be purged. This will be the full fruition of the removal of his sin, when he makes all the stones of the altars to the Alahayam, which I explained to you that when we say Yam, Y-A-M, or we say in the Israeli Im, the I am, at the end of a word, it's a multiplier. It's a multiplier. And when you do a deeper dive, excuse me, tongue tied a little bit. When you do a deeper dive into the etymology of this word and you look at older sources, it literally tells you that these beings were demons. Because guess what? The same word that's used for demons is the same word that's used for gods. Look it up. I encourage you to look this up. Then he says, the full removal of his sin, when he makes all the stones of the altars to the Alahayam like chalk stones that are beaten to pieces. So the Asharayam, the sacred poles, and the sun images stand up no more. Okay, so when we see the paintings of, this blonde hair, blue-eyed, pale man being depicted as the Messiah, we are literally looking at a sun image. That image represents sun worship, which is pagan. It's paganism. There's no way we can get around that. But the thing here is that these things have to be removed from us. So in order for them to be removed from us, we have to properly understand what this thing is, what they are. Okay, what are these things? See, the main law breaking was of the first four commandments. Yes, we took usury. Yes, we did all those evil things. Yes, we were into sexual immorality. Mixing with other nations that we had no business mixing with. But the main iniquity, sin, falling away, the main missing the mark was the worshiping of the Alahayam. It's true. Even though you may not want to agree with it, but see, it's not that you're not agreeing with me, you're not agreeing with him who sent me.